My name is Don Lohman. I was born on May 1st, 1924 in Osage County, Kansas.
Eastern Kansas was a common destination for Welsh settlers in the 19th century. A series of bad harvests in Wales spurred farmers to seek new opportunities in America, and Welsh newspapers proclaimed that land in Nebraska and Kansas was both cheap and fertile. Mr. Lohman is descended from these early homesteaders and farmers.
My grandfather was directly from Wales, and oddly enough, his name was Tom Jones. Can you imagine that? I had the first Tom Jones. I came to Colorado looking for a job, and that's when I found a job on the railroad. I went to work for the railroad in January 1943 and stayed with them for 41 years.
Well before the frontier was closed in 1890, the Santa Fe Railroad had recognized the viability of the Arkansas River Valley. In 1875, they erected a roundhouse and depot, which quickly became the village of La Junta. In less than a decade, it grew to a town of several hundred residents and became home to the very first Harvey House, a historic restaurant chain that introduced the Blue Plate Special.
My first job was called a call boy, and this call boy, his responsibility was to call the crews for the outbound trains. Because here at La Junta, we changed the crews, made up trains, called the crews, and there in those years there were 5 men on a crew. That job, when I took it in 1943, paid $5.40 a day. It was a tough job, but it was a good job, and it paid good. But I worked that job for 5 months until I went to the Navy in June of 1943, and was gone 3 years. I came back after the World War II and claimed my job, went back, ironically, to the same darn job I started with. Time moved on, and got a couple of little promotions in the field, and so it was a good job. When the Santa Fe first started building between here and Raton, was in 1878, and it was an important little town. It really was, and there's still evidence of it out there.
The new towns of the West, based on ranching, farming, and the railway, were vulnerable to both economic whims and the forces of nature. The 1920s tested the resolve of Coloradans again and again. In June of 1921, a cloudburst swelled the Arkansas and Fountain Rivers, causing millions of dollars in damage and taking hundreds of lives in Pueblo County. Smaller towns simply couldn't recover from such setbacks. Timpus, a once thriving community southwest of La Junta with hotels, restaurants, and a school, is now all but deserted.
In the 1920s, they built a dam on Timp Creek, and they were going to start irrigating around through that country out there. Well, in 1922, it had a big, heavy rainstorm, and it burst. It was a coming town until that dam burst, and then that was the end of it.
It sounds like it wasn't too much after the flood that Timpus declined.
We started declining, it certainly did. Yes, it did. And then after World War II, it really went down.
Show me the train you call a cannonball. That's the train, don't stop me at all.
And of course, the railroad had a huge impact on the city of La Junta and the entire area around here, because When I came to work for the company here in 43, there were at least 2,000 men employed over in the shop area. And of course, in those years, it was steam locomotives, and they would bring them here to the shops, run them through the roundhouse, service them, and then if they needed any other work done, they'd put them over in the shops, tear them apart, fix them up,
Right.
and they'd done all that right here at the hut. So there were 2,000 people in the shop. Now that didn't include the clerks that we had operating, or the section hands, or the train and enginemen that were here. There were just a lot of people in the city of La Junta. If you worked for the railroad and you lived in La Junta, well, you were just it. That's all there was to it. We had about 60 clerks working here at the time at just La Junta Station. And I was the chief clerk for a few years, and finally got appointed to the agent, and worked the agent's job for 8 or 9 years. And that's when we started closing all these little stations around. And I worked that job for about 8 years. And when they closed the La Junta station as an agent, then they reestablished a job called Manager of Regional Freight. And I was in charge of this station and all the little ones here in southeastern Colorado. So that was my final job. I retired July the 1st, 1984. And this year, it'll be 30 years. Jeez. Can't believe it. A railroad man, yeah, that was good news.
If you ride the steamboat, I ride the Ellen Hen. Mama, that's a train that sure carries in the wind.